it's incredible what you're doing, but let's rewind. And we always like to say, before you tell us what you do, tell us why you do it. And now we know what you do. Let's go back in time to the little Leah, about how you grew up, where you grew up, and what motivated you to move towards this.
It's interesting. When myself and the co-founder started this, it just seemed like a really cool thing to do. Like, people comment, the number one comment, in fact, that we get is, "I wish I had this when I was a kid," right? And I'm like, that's why we started it. We wish we did, right? It's now been about 7 years that the charity's been operating. And the more I reflect, I'm actually understanding what that internal voice was that was saying, you have to do that, because I was one of those terrible teens. I changed schools 10 times. My parents divorced when I was 4, not a uncommon story. It was not a friendly divorce. But then I encountered step parents on both sides, one that was very cruel, abusive, and things of that nature, and had a big impact on me. And I grew up just feeling like I didn't have anyone advocating for me. I felt like my parents were making decisions that weren't necessarily with my interest in mind. I felt like I had lost a lot of trust with the adults in my life. And so when I hit that pivotal age of 13, 14 years of age, I started making my own decisions, and they were pretty terrible. So I mentioned that I changed schools 10 times. Some of that was because I was getting myself deliberately kicked out of school. I was actually called in to do a bit of a panel, if you will, a bit of a survey with a city who was looking at gang violence and prevention. And they were listing off all of these things that high-risk youth have. And they were like, criminal activity of, stealing and theft and breaking and entering and doing drugs and, listed off all of these things. And I'm like, oh no, I've done all of those. Like, I got tattoos when I was 15 that were homemade. Did drugs, sold drugs, eventually wasn't living at home anymore. And just making decisions that didn't serve me. And it's interesting because there was this moment when I was with a boyfriend. I had just gotten kicked out of school and went to a school that, in fact, you only take one course at a time. So I had fallen behind a lot. This was the second or the last half of grade 11. And I'll mention as well, I'd been both bullied and the bullier. Every time I changed school, I'd put on a new persona. Well, I'm going to be the bullier this time because I got bullied last time, right? And I'd been just penned up this anger inside of me. And I think it was because I overheard a conversation about me as opposed to someone having the conversation with me that my defenses were down. And they said, it was actually the mother of my boyfriend talking to him saying, you two just aren't good for each other. And I don't know what it was about that, but I was like, all of a sudden, it's kind of like, when someone has an addiction and they go, I had this moment of clarity and I was like, this isn't serving me anymore, right? And it's about, I realized in that moment, that was my moment of clarity and I didn't know why. But all of a sudden, my younger self flashed before my eyes. When I was young, and granted, in the abusive household, I had a stepbrother and we were only about 11, 12-ish. He was a year older than me. And I remember we loved money. I don't know why. We just loved it. I saved every dollar of my allowance. Now, I loved saving money. He loved spending money. So I used to have to hide my money because he'd try to find it. But we were this was like latchkey kid era too. So we were taking buses by ourselves. And it must have been his idea. But all of a sudden, we were going to flea markets. Like, I used to joke, if it wasn't nailed down in the house, we were taking it to the flea market and selling it. And he had this terrible knitting machine that would knit these god-awful scarves. And I would make gift boxes out of old holiday cards. And we just sold whatever we could. And here we are, just these tiny kids by ourselves at a flea market, which was primarily seniors, booting around selling their old stuff. And I felt so powerful. I was making my own money. I was talking to strangers. We got there by ourselves unless our parents needed to drive us to drop stuff off, but they were just leaving us there and then coming back at the end of the day. And that core memory it wasn't the memory, it was the feeling I had there, which was, you're capable. You can literally make your own money. You can travel if you need to get away from a situation. You can talk to strangers. You can navigate this big world, and it's so much bigger than this bubble you're living in right now. So whatever it was about that conversation, as soon as my boyfriend came upstairs, I broke up with him. And I said, this isn't right. And so grade 12, I went back into it. I left the other school, went back to the regular school system, had 2 jobs, got my driver's license, bought a car, took an extra course during lunch hours and managed to graduate on time, and the rest was kind of history. Now, I still had some mental health difficulties through that, but I was able to cope because of this core belief about who I was. And I remembered all the goals and dreams that I had as this young child that felt like they were taking over the world, even though they were just selling at small flea markets. So that memory, I've now come to realize, when we have these experiences, and of course, for me, the entrepreneurial one really resonates. When I see these kids as young as 7 launching businesses, we have a rule at all of our markets. Parents are not allowed at their child's booths. It scares them initially, but then they realize, wow, look at them go. Like, look at them make change. Look at them hear no from a stranger and just bounce back from it like it was nothing. That is that memory, that experience. I want these kids to have these core experiences and beliefs in themselves about their capability, about their value, about what they can do. So if they should need to have that wake-up call, that thing that, if they do fall into a bad crowd, if something like that happens to them and they have that moment of clarity that, yeah, it's time for a change, but I don't know what the change could be, they can reflect back and go, it doesn't matter, I've got the skills. Let's just do something different today.